Jake Boudrot. Welcome to part 2 of the Almadam Experience, Turning a Corner. This installment will show exactly how Development Almadam was a natural outgrowth of the Industrial Adjustment Services process. This show will also illustrate the projects which Development Almadam made for the people of Almadam to give them hope, education, retraining, and jobs. We will show how the community responded by creating projects on their own and with Development Almadam to train these people. We will show the institutions and agencies within government and the communities themselves and how they responded. Above all, we will show the people how they made the precarious transition from the fisheries. I hope you find this show enlightening, and I hope it tells for you the story of how Development Almadam initiated the community economic development process here on Almadam. Almadam has historically drawn from the sea to propel our economy, keep it competitive, allow local people to work locally, and keep our communities healthy. When the Atlantic ground fishery and the Petit Gras fish plant were closed, many were faced with reduced or zero income, without work, and without direction. The Industrial Adjustment Services Committee commissioned GTA consultants to study our economic woes and propose instruments to reinvigorate a stagnant economy by consulting local people. The report of the GTA consultants served as the framework for the projects of the IAS committee, as well as guidelines for its final report. From this, the IAS committee recommended that Development Almadam concentrate on diversifying the economy by concentrating on the promising sectors of aquaculture, tourism, small manufacturing, a renewed fisheries, and information technology. The agenda for DEMA was set by the people of Almadam, and it was time for change.
We needed a catalyst. We needed an organization that could realize those opportunities, that could put the elements in place that were needed for the people of Almadam to establish industries in those areas. And the decision was taken that if there was going to be an effective follow-up to the IAS process, to the input we had received from the community, that what we needed was a community economic development organization to drive the process forward. So throughout the summer of 1994, one of the things that I did, in addition to working at Tel Il, was I researched different models of community economic development organizations. We went to Shetty Camp. Karen Malcolm and I went to Shetty Camp. We went to Sydney to visit New Dawn Enterprises. When we were in Shetty Camp, we met with the people who were involved in the cooperative movement. And we met with the people who were involved in the Shetty Camp Economic Development Commission. I forget exactly what it's called, but we met with those people. We received, we looked at their constitutions, how the organizations were structured. We asked them practical questions, practical organizational questions. And we did the same thing in Sydney when we visited New Dawn Enterprises. That's Father Greg McLeod's organization, New Dawn Enterprises and BCA Holdings Limited. And out of that, we put together what we thought was an effective model for a community economic development organization.
With the framework for DEMA established, committed leaders from across Almadam were needed to steer DEMA in a successful course.
I was working at Tel Il at the time, and Don was chairman of Tel Il, so I said, if you're willing to give me some time while I'm working to research this and to try and come up with a sensible model for this organization, then I'm willing to do that. So he agreed to that. At that point, we talked to John Boudrot about it, and John was in favor of us doing that. And then right away we involved Karen Malcolm, and she was involved in every step of the process, going to when we went to Shetty Camp, when we went to Sydney, when we read through the constitutions of the organizations, when we discussed it. Also, Sean Bond was around at the time. He was working for an organization in Louisdale, and he was very interested in what we were doing. And we kept him informed and involved in all of our discussions throughout that whole period of time.
The same people basically who had been there to do the work of the IAS committee simply turned themselves over and said to start the action end of it, we will continue, because there has to be continuity. Somebody has to know the plan if you're going to put the plan into action. So those were the same people. It was just a kind of transition from being planning oriented to being action oriented.
And at that time, we did look for some core funding to set up a development corporation. We took the IAS report and submitted to various funding agencies, government agencies, and really nobody came across with any money. But at the time, the morale was really high for a number of reasons. TELIL was just formed, and that was by some of the people that were on the IAS committee. We had undertaken a number of projects and co-sponsored Youth Corps project, an aquaculture extension office, and because of that, there was some things happening, and we continued to go forth on a volunteer basis just because momentum was high at the time. And I believe it was probably in the spring of 1994 before we had actually tried to get the incorporation underway for Development Ilma Dam and get a board together.
Now that DEMA's leadership was set, a specific plan of action was required. They needed to establish goals, pursue employment opportunities, and become established within Ilma Dam. This plan was influenced by the final reports of the GTA consultants, the IAS committee, and community feedback.
Well, when Development Ilma Dam got started, basically we had a planning document that came from the IAS and the GTA reports, that said that there was certain sectors of the economy that could be developed on Ilma Dam. There was certain things that there was real good opportunity in for the people of Ilma Dam and the economy of Ilma Dam. But that was it. It didn't say specifically what projects that could be developed or what business ideas. So from the onset, we were faced with a problem of having a map, but not really knowing which place we were going to, kind of thing, right? So we really had to look long and hard at the different projects that we could work on, that we could actually do ourselves based upon our skills and time and experience. And so really for the first little while, it was a big challenge to find projects that we could do and do good, because we were faced with a crisis. People were unemployed, and so the natural tendency is to try to find all those job-related projects that could create employment right away. And the thing is, what we soon found out, or eventually found out, is you can't build a house if you don't have a foundation. And so we had to work on a lot of the foundation projects first.
The first thing that Development Ilma Dam did was look at the report that was written from the IAS process, which outlined the 4 different sectors that they wanted to touch on, and they started investigating different areas of those sectors where they wanted to pursue, and everything kind of went. You were always 3 months behind where you wanted to be, so you were always playing catch up. You were always flat out working on a project that should have been done 3 months ago because you missed the season or whatever. So it was just very wide open, looking for different areas to pursue different development.
While at a meeting at Silver Donald Cameron's, the Corps of DEMA examined each aspect of the report to identify those most viable for Ilma Dam.
I think about 5 hours after we went into Silver Donald Cameron's house one evening, over a quart of light champagne, DEMA was on the road. There was no question that an action organization had to take off. or else nobody would plant the seeds that would be required to generate community economic development on Almaden. So it wasn't a long process. Everybody believed right from the word go that if you were on this ship, you were going to take it the distance.
I suspect that what it did was it crystallized some of what we've been thinking. It wasn't a turn on the road. It was maybe a kind of a stop and take stock and get on with the next one.
We have to look at the possibilities for employment. What are they? Are our people prepared to accept them and prepared to train for them? So again, it became a two-level type of thinking. So we had to look through all of the possibilities, sift through them, and see which ones of them suited the culture of the community, suited the educational base, and would be broadly accepted and would have a chance at returning a profit.
By February 1995, DEMA was off the ground. Its goals were to represent the community while being accountable to the goals and priorities that emerged during the IAS process. Initial board members were handpicked, eventually growing to 22 members of the community. That summer, DEMA became a community-owned, non-profit, limited company, also holding the identity of the Almaden Community Improvement Association. The stage was now set to hire a staff to implement community economic development on Almaden.
We got either negative responses or no response at all. In some cases, they didn't even answer our letters. And that situation remained in place until Harold Crow adopted us as one of the communities he wanted to help. So he got us that initial grant of money in the winter of 1995. And that's what allowed us to start and do the research projects that I've already mentioned. Then in the early summer of 1995, we talked to Harold Kroll again. We had finished our research projects. We had identified areas that we felt held promise for the organization, or projects that we thought would take advantage of the areas that had been identified in the IAS report. So we went back to a whole range of government agencies. We went to the municipality, the Provincial Department of Community Services, the Provincial Department of Economic Renewal, and ECBC, Enterprise Cape Breton. Now Harold Kroll was able to bring the provincial agencies on side, and the municipality came on side right away. They were very easy to work with, very supportive. They gave us office space at the courthouse. They covered some of our overhead at the courthouse. And in the summer of '95, they came on side and actually gave us a grant of money towards paying some of the salaries and overhead for the organization.
Karen Malcolm evolved as the first semi-full-time or quasi-full-time employee of DEMA, and she would be the director through which all of the activity would flow. But the funding wasn't great, so we still had to rely on a lot of volunteer work.
Joelle Bowen came from the Youth Services Corps and started with Development Almaden that spring of 1995, as well as Peter DeWolf, Michael Sampson, and Ann David. They all started. The whole goal of Development Almaden was to try and get the youth who they felt had some energy and a real sense of a future with Almaden to get to work and do some work for Development Almaden. So those 4 employees started. They did I think it was a 2-month or 1-month term. Some of them moved on to other things, and others, like Joelle, stayed on and is still with us today.
Staff members sit on the board, but not the executive. The number of staff has depended upon the number of projects they were involved in, as well as in success obtaining funding. Employees act as local planners and consultants, initiating and operating businesses while providing counseling to local entrepreneurs. Skills such as marketing, finance, computer technology, business management, accounting, public relations, and legal services are all attributes of staff and board members. Strategic planning, business planning, proposal writing, seeking funds, and motivating individuals has been learned on a need-to-know basis. Because of DEMA's young staff, aggressive mistakes were made in a process foreign to Alma-Dam.
Because we were always going wide open and behind the times, sometimes we didn't spend as much time planning as we should have. And when you do that, you fail. And when you do development, if one project in 10 succeeds, you have a fantastic success rate. So it was, there was no way that everything we started was going to be 100% successful. I guess when we first started, we didn't realize that, and that's why the failures seem like huge failures. But I guess now, with a little bit of time under our belts, we realize that, yes, we're going to put time into projects, and yes, they're not going to work out, and all we can do is just get up and move on to the next project.
Being a new group and starting off, our inexperience played havoc with us at times. It's been a learning process for all those involved, for everybody involved with Development Alma-Dam and the IS committee and so forth. I don't think anybody's had any experience in community economic development per se, and it's been a learning process. And there's been a number of roads we've gone down, and we've backed up, turned around, and found another road. And a number of projects, too, that we've taken on that perhaps we didn't get the communication out or the right word out, and a lot of it was just inexperience on our part. But what has happened is because people have stuck with the process, we've learned from our mistakes, and we're finding that there's more successes than failures now.
Some of the failures is that we started and the people that were doing the development didn't have a whole lot of experience or background in development, and it took a while for us to kind of go down different roads and hit some blockades and have to turn back and experience kind of all kinds of I guess barriers, and we had to work around, and then after that kind of did some training, and that kind of got better as time went on.
Inexperience aside, DEMA initiated some projects that on paper appeared very promising, but when funding was requested, or when these theories were put into practice, they did not take off as expected. Potential in the berry industry, the Heritage Regions proposal, the Commercial Center proposal, and a suitable site for AFL tank manufacturers were such failures.
Looking at the blueberry, the possibility for blueberry industries was one of the ones that we wanted to do for any kind, basically, of quasi-agricultural type development, whether they be cranberry, blueberry, or strawberries on the island. That one didn't take off, but nonetheless we put a lot of effort into it.
Well, some of the other good projects that kind of got stalled or put back on the shelves was the Heritage Regions project, which we started about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. That was what we thought was a real good project. It was a project that its goal was to designate Alma-Dam a heritage region. It would have made us distinct. It would have given us a uniqueness that other areas, not only in the province but in Canada, didn't have, and we could use that as a marketing tool. And we worked with Heritage Canada for on and off for about a year and a half. And it just kind of fizzled out in the end. We didn't get the support that we thought there would be. I think it's still a good project, and maybe the time wasn't right then, but it might be right in the next year or so. And I think it could do a lot for the island. We worked on getting a commercial center for the island. We thought it was a good thing. People had other opinions, and in the end it didn't go anywhere. We spent a lot of time and money on it and effort, but it didn't pan out for a number of reasons. And so, looking back, in hindsight, there's some things that we could have done differently, but like I said, we had a vision of what we thought could be, and we thought that it was needed then.
DEMA often finds itself involved in development for an island of different communities that does not see itself as one community that can work together for a common goal, share the benefits, and keep development ongoing. Because each of Alma-Dam's 4 major communities are spread out and have been historically self-sufficient, there was never a need to work together during times of prosperity.
What I found was that there was still underlying development, was that there was a lot of territorialism, like I mentioned before, between different communities and different groups. There was parochialism, and a lot of that stuff that I hadn't seen really before or really thought of, but that became a real barrier towards development, at least in my terms anyways, that the fact that a lot of people weren't getting along on certain issues, and I found that it was real difficult to do development when you don't have all your people on side, or at least willing to do that. But I think over the last number of years, last year anyway, I think you see a lot of that subsiding, and people are getting over that fact, mostly because of the crisis. And so I think in terms of that being a barrier, it's also the crisis has also helped bring down that barrier in some way. I think if there hadn't been a crisis, and then maybe a lot of that territorialism and parochialism would still be here.
Getting proper information to the community has been another challenge. The amount of work undertaken and achieved has caused confusion as to what the organization stands for.
I guess it goes back to when you've lived in a community for all of your life, where the community has been industrialized, where there is no need for development. People are on the mindset that they work for big companies and they gather their paycheck, and as far as development is concerned, it's not a need or something that people look into. So what we were faced with when we started at the outset, that people didn't have the community economic development mindset. So that was a big challenge for us to kind of really try to get that message out to the community and get people to buy in to what we were doing, and even to go along with it, support it.
I know in the community there has been, and I've heard it myself, a lot of people talking negatively about DEMA, and I wish that there was a way that we could convince all the people of Almadam to come to a DEMA board meeting, which are open to the public, and listen to the things that they have done since they've started, and listen to the plans that they have for the future, and the plans for the future that are going to bring resources, people, and jobs to the people of Almadam. The work they're doing is for the people of Almadam, and if people could come to a board meeting and hear for themselves and stop, listening to what other people are saying that might have a grudge for whatever reason, and listen to what the people are doing, I think that we'd have more people involved and things would go a lot further and a lot faster than they have been going in the past.
Although DEMA has been somewhat creative in maintaining its existence with some government assistance and fundraising, it is not an easy task. Government is not prepared to allow for operational assistance during a transitional period, so the organization needs to become self-sufficient from projects that generate revenue. It is increasingly difficult to build administrative costs into projects now that they often will not even consider this contribution as equity into the project.
The thing about community economic development,
Gloria Hill was hired to rectify this shortcoming.
When we had approached the governments for some core funding, one of the commitments that Development Almadam made was that we were going to be financially viable within 5 years. And we asked for funding graded, give us X dollars in year A, X dollars minus this much in year B, and by the time the fifth year came, we wouldn't be getting any money from the government. We'd be fully financed, internally financed. And I was hired to do internal financing in the fall of 1995. And my mandate was to develop things that could raise money for Development Almadam, as well as bringing tourists, new money to the island, instead of trying to get money from the locals, bring new money to the island and raise awareness and do some cultural events, improve the island while I'm raising money. Unfortunately, it didn't work. We tried different things and realized, I guess, that to do fundraising would take years of setting yourself up. Development Almadam was a new organization and didn't really have its roots in any community. Therefore, we never received support from any one community, and didn't really receive it from any community because of that, because we didn't have local community groups, has their CWL, for example, who have members in each household who rally together and support. And we didn't really set our groundwork down, and didn't and didn't have that, therefore it didn't work. Now, we are still trying to do things on the side to raise small amounts of money, but I think we realize that we'll have to take a different tact if we're going to do internal financing. And that was one of the things, I think, that was a tried and failure, but learned things from it.
Some of DEMA's initial projects far exceeded expectations. Despite problems of community territorialism and inexperienced staff and a lack of stable core funding, DEMA applied their developing skills to facilitate the transition from the fisheries and help people find their employment niche. This was done through a series of small projects that trained, educated, and found employment for people.
Well, some of the successes are, I guess, the small options homes that have been created on the island, and being able to, I guess, acquire funding, operational funding that was something that was successful, but that wasn't easy, and I guess that was one of the challenges that we've had, was trying to do development and trying to create revenue at the same time to keep the operation going.
When they decided to set up the Aquaculture Extension Office, they made a big step into the future of Almaden, maybe without knowing it. I don't know, maybe they did realize what they were doing, but that set the stage for the aquaculturalists of Almaden to become where they're moving to now, which is to be a very serious business and a very viable employer in Almaden. I guess that one is pretty good. The Small Options Home is also another one. The Small Options Home really ended up being our first real success. Hired people, put people to work, kept some of the residents of the community in the community where they should have been all along. That one was nice. That one is still, in a sense, one of my favorites.
We sponsored a number of initiatives, and again, those were mostly through Alvin. You know, there was a training course for flagmen. There was a home sewing project where we taught people to sew. There was a coastal resource mapping project where we mapped out the resources along the coastline of Isle Madame and Richmond County. We took advantage of them, obviously, with regard to the call center. Mind you, by that time, the resources we were taking advantage of weren't specifically from the TAGS program. They were just resources that were there through the regular HRD programs. And we used them to train the call center employees.
There's a number of training courses that we've put on because we felt we could marry up some opportunities for individuals. Coastal Zone Mapping Project was one. We had a desire to identify the natural assets of Isle Madame and log them, and we really felt it was a good opportunity for individuals to learn more about the island, and at the same time see potential opportunities, whether in the tourism industry or so forth. We sponsored a tourism awareness course, which, for the same reasons, we got people involved knowing more about the island and the tourism opportunities around the island. The other course that we sponsored was a telemarketing course through the Collège de l'Acadie, and the purpose of that is because we are developing a call center and we need recruits that have the ability and capabilities to work in that call center environment.
These projects brought people from around Almaden together, allowed them to work with each other for common goals, and tear down barriers between communities. DEMA then looked to other more long-term projects that built on Almaden's existing skills and infrastructure. In 1994, DEMA recognized a need to boost an infant aquaculture industry. They sponsored a 7-month project to enable a biologist and business planning technician to work with 16 Richmond County farmers and counsel those getting started. This was part of a broader concept for the Aquaculture Extension Office.
The Aquaculture Extension Project, it was a project or a proposal that was actually put forth by the Aquaculture Association. I guess it was the Richmond County Aquaculture Association. activity with that organization had somewhat ceased, and there was some money still on the table, and Development Ilmadan was approached, or actually it wasn't Development Ilmadan at the time, it was the IAS committee that was approached to find out if there was something that we could do with this money. Looking at the aquaculture industry at the time, it was very much in its infancy. There were a number of farmers around Richmond County that were in need of technical assistance and also business planning assistance, and that's when we pulled together a small proposal, and it was for a 7-month period based on assisting these aquacultures to kind of make it to the next step. And at that time, the proposal was accepted. We got some money, and it really at that time, Sean Bond was hired, who worked with the farmers, helping them getting some strong business plans in order. We brought in a biologist, Dave McNerney, who worked with the farmers, and there were some issues about scallop spat collection that they wanted addressed. And there was a number of things and duties that he had taken on with working with government relations and departments, getting information to farmers and so forth. And also there was a strategic plan for aquaculture for Richmond County that came out of that project that's been used time and time again since then. And it was a project that was somewhat key in a number of cases for farmers. I think enough relevant information got to them that they were able to continue and move to the next step.
We put a lot of effort into aquaculture. We put the effort at the developmental level, at the scientific level, where we brought in the expertise, where we got people into the industry that would have a knowledge of the industry and would have a better chance of survival. We helped from the business plan point of view. We helped from the logistics point of view, finding out the better locations, doing the surveys to find out where the better spat collection locations were, and I think that's the one that probably has the best chance of the most success as far as a real employment possibility on Almaden, a real employer. It's long term. People have to realize that you do not start an aquaculture business and have a scallop for sale the next day, and the guys that are in it that have stuck it out are going to make it. And you know, the fact is that they're going to make it for a number of reasons. I guess the main reason would be their own entrepreneurship.
We've seen right from the get-go that once again, Almaden, one of the natural advantages that we had was the fact that we could, for some reason, grow shellfish in particular better than some areas around the province or in the land of Canada. So we had some natural factors right off the bat that were in our favor. So it's really only natural that you build on your strengths. So we really tried to help the aquaculturists at the time in any way we could, and making sure that they get off the ground and were on their feet. Some other things or projects that we did in aquaculture was we helped set up a community investment fund that raised $150,000 locally that could be put into aquaculture on the island.
But in aquaculture, with the people that we have here, the existing aquaculturists, we're hoping that we can help those existing aquaculturists to grow, and we might be able to put quite a few of our people in with the aquaculturists, and going from harvesting to farming in the fisheries is something that will be able to control our resources. So I'm very excited about that, and I think that will create quite a few number of jobs in the years to come.
Keeping in mind that Almaden has historic links with the sea, DEMA has listened to fishers who feel their industry is being ignored in the process of diversifying the island economy. DEMA has helped these people form the Almaden Committee of Displaced Fishery Workers, or IMCOD, and has DEMA members on the committee. IMCOD is presently seeking opportunities in fishing alternative species like crab, shrimp, silver hake, and finfish.
I know the government is trying to adjust people out of the fisheries, and we've done that. We have over half our people out of the fisheries, but there's still viable commercial fisheries. You know, I think this year Nova Scotia was, the value of fish landed in Nova Scotia last year was almost $500 million. So that's a significant industry. Right off our shores, as we speak, draggers from New Brunswick and from southwest Nova Scotia are fishing shrimp, significant quantities of shrimp. And they're fishing right off Canso, Almaden, and Louisbourg. So we think that there is an opportunity there for a community, for a quota, a shrimp quota, to be given to the community to allow us to go out and fish some of that offshore shrimp. That's one opportunity in the renewed fishery, and we think we're making some progress in that direction right now. The second opportunity in a renewed fishery, or the second most viable one right now, seems to be in the area of snow crab. Reports by the Department of Fisheries are indicating that there are significant amounts of snow crab out there that aren't being fished, and it looks as if, or we're hoping, that our local fishermen, primarily our lobster fishermen, I guess they're the only fishermen we have left right now, will be able to tap into that snow crab industry, snow crab fishery, which will create a steadier employment for them, and it will also create, between the two, if you have the snow crab and the shrimp, if we could get a little bit of each, then we'd be able to possibly be able to reopen the idled former Isle Dam Fishermen's Co-op and have processing going on there. So that could create 30, 40, 50 jobs, plus the jobs that you create on the offshore boats. 2 offshore draggers would create 20, 25 jobs between them.
The renewed fisheries, again, is something that it took a while for me to instill in the people that the fisheries was gone and it would take a long time to rebound. When we're looking at the renewed fisheries, I guess it gives a little bit of a hope to be able to bring back some of the types of stuff or the skills that were already here in the community, and people will have an opportunity, if we can be successful in obtaining the quotas that we need for our area, that will be a plus in our development.
Development Ilma Dam is working in conjunction with the committee, which is called the Ilma Dam Committee of Displaced Fishers. And what they're looking at is renewed fisheries. Yes, our cod is looking somewhat bleak, but there's a number of fisheries that we could be partaking in, and there's a fair amount of fish that's being caught off our shores that really doesn't seem all that fair, that we don't have a hand in. There's a number of proposals that have been done up, and shrimp proposals inshore and offshore that's been done up. Development Ilma Dam's had a role as far as getting the proposal done and coordinating, but a lot of the insight is coming from the committee themselves.
Another sector highlighted from community feedback, the IAS committee report, and the GTA consultants report was tourism. Tourism in Cape Breton has increased dramatically in the 90s due to the Cabot Trail and Fortress Louisbourg. Ilma Dam also needs infrastructure like this to attract visitors here. Luckily, we have a unique culture, environment, and history to attract and impress tourists.
I think there are tremendous opportunities for us in tourism, and there probably are opportunities in 12-month tourism, one way or another. I mean, to me, the proof of that is Arthur Vollmer's little enterprise up in Jamfrance Harbor. I mean, Arthur has the connections with the German market, knows what they want, and he fills that place 11 months of the year, and the 12th month he's in Germany selling the other 11 months. Well, if he can do it, it can be done, right? But what we don't, it's a sort of chicken and egg thing. We don't have much in the way of tourist accommodation, for example, on the island. Well, you can't bring tourists here and not give them some place to sleep. So there's some needs, and those needs are, and it also flips around the other way. I mean, you don't bring them because you don't have the accommodation. They don't come because the accommodation isn't there, you know. And somehow we've got to do a whole building job through all of that. And I think to follow up the idea of boutique tourism, we're going to have to think in terms of some innovative offerings. Now, Greg Silver, who's recently moved into the north side, has a whole thing under development about sailing vacations and sailing in catboats up into the Bredor Lakes and back to Discoos and so forth. That's the kind of thing that I think there's room for an awful lot of that sort of thing, but we haven't really quite got a grip on that yet.
Boutique tourism. That was kind of really one of the first ones that we started looking at ways how we could attract people here, because we knew we had a lot of good things in our favor. We had, first of all, our culture, the fact that we had, you know, the most of the population on Ilma Dam are Acadian, but that we also have other cultures on the island that you know, add a little variety and make us a little unique, like Irish and other prominent you know, families from other regions of the world. So that was number one. I think culture was number one. Then two was the fact that of really our natural beauty, the fact that we are an island makes us unique right off the bat. And we have a lot of unique natural phenomena around the island and beautiful scenery around the island. So those two things there really are really good starting places, and they really bode well for boutique tourism, for that niche type of tourism. We didn't want to build a big resort or a big amusement park to try to attract people here. We felt that what we had here already was a good basis to build a tourism industry. So we started looking at ways, specific projects at doing that. Right now we're working on a trail project in the Cape Oged area. It's really more of an eco trail. It's a beautiful trail that kind of takes in a lot of things. We're working on, as well, we're working on a waterfront development in Ayrshire that works around the Forge Museum. We'd like to work with the artisans and crafters on the island to help them form some sort of cooperative or association so that we can build on the fact that we have, a large number of very gifted people who can make beautiful things out of practically nothing. So those are the things that specific projects that we'd like to work with or are working with now, so that we can build up an industry here that's more complementary to the surroundings and the people.
Small-scale manufacturing is another sector that is small in scale but can yield some positive long-term results. This sector is locally owned, locally based, locally staffed, and provides a service to local people. This helps Almadam avoid relying on an outside, large company or owner who has the option to leave at any time, throwing hundreds out of work.
Well, you can see any number of examples of small, I guess you could call them manufacturing, they're semi-manufacturing. You can talk about Junior Sampson's portable sawmill, and he's producing a line of wood products, primarily a clapboard type product now, but he's looking at other products, Katu kilns. Production Picasso, which is producing Acadian artwork on vases and mugs and so on. We haven't been involved in anything directly in that sector in small manufacturing. Our primary role there has been to support the local entrepreneurs who have got into that sector.
I think there's been a lot of small manufacturing businesses that have been started over the last number of years, and that goes directly to what I was saying before about entrepreneurship and the fact that a lot of people, started their own business. When you look at Katu kilns in Sampson's Cove, Little Ants area, then you're looking at Junior Sampson's sawmill in the Scoos, Production Picasso, which is a very good example of a small-scale manufacturing that utilized our culture and our natural abilities as a business, and as well AFL tank manufacturing, which Greg Boucher runs as well. So I think we've seen a lot of good small-scale businesses, manufacturing business start up in the last number of years, and it's something which I think we can be very good at. We've got the relevant skills, and I think as more and more people kind of take the plunge into being entrepreneurs, you'll see some more small-scale manufacturing pop up.
There was a number of businesses that started up over the last couple of years that come to mind. One being a photography shop, and it was a displaced Fisher person who had taken the opportunity of the training, went away for a number of years, and has pulled together a photo shop in their home. And when talking to her, she doesn't tell you that she's got the world by her foot, but she is in something she really loves, and she does see a future in it, but it's a long, drawn-out process for her. Something else, Katu wood kilns. and I don't really know the situation there, but I do know that when you go by there, they are moving wood products and they're going full out all the time. And there's also Junior, who set up the wood siding business, and I've been talking to him recently, and he's finding all kinds of contract work, and he's really happy with his transition at this point. Very busy, mind you, but really happy. And then there's Michael Sampson, who set up his restaurant in the Picasso building, and we all know he's going to be really successful just by by the volume of bread that goes through that place.
Information technology like Talil, En route Almadam, the Tradewinds call center, and Istam Studios are a part of another economic sector that is growing exponentially. Almadam was once robbed of its shipbuilding industry because we did not make provisions for the technology of steam engines. DEMA now wants to ensure that we do not get left behind in the movement towards using new technologies to expand our economy.
I think information technology, if you look at people like Greg Silver, prime example of the fact that Almadam can be in downtown Hong Kong, can be in downtown New York, can be in downtown Toronto, all at the same time. You have, it's a wide open marketplace. That's the one area where we are on Main Street on the information highway. And Greg came down to Discourse and liked the area and wanted to move down to the area and prove that, yeah, sure, you can take an electronics-based firm and a technology-based firm and set it up in Discourse and make it work. There's no question. And I think we're turning out now, we're finally starting to turn out people who are students in school who are ready to challenge that market, who are technologically sound and who are creative and are going to be ready to challenge that market in the very near future.
Information technology has been a buzzword that governments have been using for the last number of years. It's really hard to have concrete examples sometime of what information technology really means. But I think a good concrete example locally here, not necessarily that we are involved in or had direct control over, but when you look at the Collège de l'Acadie and the fact that we have a very good learning institution, respected institution right in our back door that is utilizing technology as a means of educating our people is a real prime example of information technology. For a project that we work directly in, we're responsible for, I think when you look at Tradewinds call center that we established in the last year and a half, I think that's a real good prime example of information technology. It's utilizing our strengths locally in conjunction with technology to make ourselves marketable. There's the fact that we had learning institutions locally, the fact that we had a large bilingual workforce, that our costs of doing business here are low, coupled with technology that we can access, combined to form Tradewinds call center so that we can market ourselves anywhere really in the world because of technology, even though we're just a small little community off the coast of Cape Breton. Another, I guess, one of the first examples of projects in the information technology was Talil. Talil began just a little before my time, before when I came on the scene, but I think it's a prime example of community utilizing technology to benefit themselves. And so I think it's a very good example of a project in the information technology sector. En route Almadam is another prime example that of a project, a recent project that is really another case where the community is utilizing technology to work for themselves, to better themselves, and to get access really to the world. Which is something that we never really had an opportunity before. So I think all those examples of technology in the community, I think really kind of stemmed from the planning process where it was highlighted that information technology really could be of a benefit to our community. going to either make or break the
DEMA has been able to overcome initial obstacles because of their strong ties with all levels of government.
The industry on the island.
Government is valuable because they can lend their experience and resources to a process that badly requires assistance.
Firms and
DEMA has partnered with Human Resources Development Canada,
so we
Enterprise Cape Breton,
decided as a board
and Economic Development and Tourism.
that firm and ensuring that
Relations continue to build with the Department of Education,
firms will fall.
the Department of Fisheries and Oceans,
So we invest 100.
and the Department of Natural Resources.
I think on a Friday and on a Monday.
However, the job of DEMA is far from finished,
Additional people.
and the assistance of government will be needed in the future.
The people who've been involved with the IAS and with DEMA, particularly the board members, you know, are well plugged in and are very savvy about figuring out where there's a program, looking at their own concrete situation, saying, okay, there's a need. We've got to have something to deal with this, and then kind of scanning the government to figure which key do you press, you know, which button do you push, which horn do you blow, in order to get something out of the government that addresses this concrete need. So I tend to think that the government has been government in general has been a bit of a passive player in all of this. What you really want from government is that they respond well to what the community does, because they can't do it anyway. If this community didn't want to do what it's done, there's no way you could make it. There's lots of communities up and down the coast that are not doing anywhere near as well as Almadam, and the reason is the communities themselves weren't able to organize and weren't able to articulate their own future and weren't able then to go and get from government what they actually need to do it. Government can't do that. I mean, senior levels of government can't do that. It's got to come from the community itself. And this community is just aces at that. The general orientation of DEMA, I think, has been borne out as in a very sensible direction. You know, we've seen a lot of job creation. I was trying to add it up in my mind over sometime in the last few months, and I figured that there had to be close to 100 jobs that had one way or another come about with DEMA's involvement. Not necessarily that DEMA started them, but it was helpful, or it, you know, pushed things along. And probably another 50 to 100 that came up more or less independent, you know, that had little or nothing to do with DEMA. And DEMA certainly didn't do them any harm, but they would have happened perhaps anyway. You start to look at 150, 200 jobs. That's a lot of jobs to create, and we only lost 500 in the first place. So we're looking at having gotten something like a third of them back again, you know. So you see a lot. That says to me that the plan was pretty sound and has been followed up pretty well. You know?
Since its formation from the IES process and subsequent incorporation in 1995, DEMA has worked hard on behalf of Almadam. DEMA closely followed community feedback, the GTA consultants, and IES committee's reports, and hired a youthful staff to pursue opportunities in each of the sectors illustrated from the reports. Perhaps DEMA was too eager, because they did suffer initial failures, which limited public confidence. Yet they overcame unstable core funding, communities divided by distance, a public desperate for jobs and who needed answers. DEMA plugged away, creating small-scale projects to train, educate, and find employment. They then looked to more long-term projects in aquaculture, and renewed fisheries, tourism, small manufacturing, and information technology to propel the Almadam economy forward. Almadam is now on the right track, and if the trends continue, we will no longer have to rely on the sea to keep us working at home.